I thought I'd do a quick video on Blitzkrieg, because we keep hearing about it, don't we? We keep saying that Vladimir Putin has launched a Blitzkrieg on Ukraine. Why has a Blitzkrieg when it's in his office? What is it? Is it even a thing? Firstly, this war is definitely not a Blitzkrieg, because Blitzkrieg means lightning war. Krieg is German for war, Blitz, lightning. And also, it's not even a real German word. It was coined by the Western press. After the 1st of September 1939, we know that the Germans invaded Poland from, three of the four sides, and then the Russians stabbed them in the back from the east. And it advanced very rapidly. It took about 3 weeks, and Poland had to surrender. Although, very impressively, many of their most talented people managed to escape and get to Britain ultimately. And you hear wonderful accounts, of Polish people fighting in the Battle of Britain, late in 1940. And you hear even, the sinking of the Bismarck. There was a Polish destroyer that kept flashing in Morse code, I'm a Pole, whilst it was hammering the larger ship. And these kinds of things. So Blitzkrieg is not a German word at all. Never was, never is, never has been. It was a Western coinage because we like the term, because every English person knows Donner and Blitzen, thunder and lightning. And it was such a rapid, mobile campaign that the Germans took over, firstly Poland, and then later on, come sort of April, May 1940, when they went into France and the Low Countries and so on. Again, a really rapid campaign. What really is it all about, though? None of that stuff was ever called Blitzkrieg. In fact, even later on, after the Germans had heard the term coined by the West, they would call it the so-called Blitzkrieg. So they never used the term. What the Germans did have, though, and what they used, and this was something they learned from, firstly, our way of fighting in the last 100 days or so of World War One, and people like Captain Fuller, who was a very famous tank strategist. The term they would use is Bewegungskrieg. Bewegungskrieg. It's a war of manoeuvre, and it means you're not fighting from static trenches, but you have what's called a Schwerpunkt, which is the hard place, or the difficult place, or the tough point, or something like that. And you literally punch through in one place. You go deep, cut off the enemy's logistics, you surround them. And once you surround them, then you get to what's called in German a Kesselschlacht. Kesselschlacht. There was only really one proper Kesselschlacht in World War One, and that was the Battle of Tannenberg, as we call it. Fergenau is probably the more correct name. But that was obviously over in the east, in East Prussia, after the Russians invaded. And that was, of course, what gave the German commanders their fame, Ludendorff and Hindenburg, because they achieved a Kesselschlacht, and they encircled one of the Russian armies and they completely destroyed it. And throughout history, that's always been the aim. We think of the Battle of Chancellorsburg, which I think that's in Virginia. Certainly in the American Civil War, quite an early battle there. But that was when famously Stonewall Jackson managed to flank the Union Army by marching them through the wilderness of Spotsylvania, and he came sideways on them like a crab. And unfortunately, of course, he died in that engagement, shot by blue-on-blue fire, friendly fire. But he managed to turn the flank, come sideways, won a great victory. Sorry, Chancellorsville, not Chancellorsburg. I got Germans on the brain, and burgers, because I like them. Chancellorsville. And the flanking march of Stonewall Jackson, very, very famous. Going back in history, we think of the Punic Wars. Obviously, we know in the Second Punic War, the Romans were fighting for their lives against Carthaginians. They won this great victory. The Carthaginians had the Battle of the River Trebia, and then they'd won another great victory at the Battle of Trasimene, which is a lake, and they had there used cover, and they'd ambushed the Romans. But there, the Romans thought they were safe. They'd gone down south to near a village called Cannae that will live in infamy. And and it was a flat plain, and they thought, there's no way we can get ambushed here, we're on a flat plain. Hannibal showed you can ambush someone even on a flat plain. And the way he did it was Hannibal himself, it was a double consular army, so it was twice the size of a usual Roman army. We're talking about nearly 100,000 men probably in the Roman army, most of them infantry, heavy infantry, a small screen of cavalry. Sorry, I have the hiccups. Inopportune time. So Hannibal was in the centre, and he had his Spanish cavalry one side, he has Mivian cavalry the other side. And what he did, he took very close command of that battle. And so he stayed in the centre, and he attacked the Romans from the centre. And so the Carthaginian line kind of bulged out right in the middle, with Hannibal right in the thick of it, and they attacked the Roman centre. But then, under Hannibal's command, they very cleverly fell back. Now, they did take a lot of casualties. Almost all the I don't know if there was Hannibalic. I'll just say Carthaginian because it's easier. The Carthaginian casualties, they did suffer, I think, about 7,000, although, hey, records are probably incorrect from that time. But yeah, they suffered quite a few casualties in that centre because they fell back. But what they did do is, these Romans were spoiling for a fight. They didn't like the fact that they'd lost 2 battles already to Hannibal. And so they were literally pressing on forwards. And they see that the fighting is going on in the centre, and really the wings aren't engaging. And so all these heavy cohorts, these maniples of Romans, are just pouring into the centre, bashing and smashing and hacking with their short Spanish swords. Gladius Hispanioli, or whatever they call it. Hacking, slaying, going in the middle. And the Hannibalaric line just dips in like a crescent moon now, until suddenly the Romans realise they've run right into the middle of the Carthaginian army, hacking and slaying. And of course, that's when Hannibal says, now guys, and suddenly all of his Spanish from the left, his Namibians from the right, and a few others from the back come in, and they achieve one of, I believe, only 2 times in history, in a large-scale battle, a double envelopment with a smaller force. The Roman army was probably twice the size of Hannibal's, but now they're surrounded. And apparently the Romans were it was probably like, I hate to talk about these things. Hillsborough is awful, 96 people died. But it was like that. It was a crush. What a terrible thing. Can you imagine being in that? They were literally crushed. The reports are they couldn't swing their swords because they were too crushed together. And the slaying and the hacking went on for hours and hours and hours and hours. And in the end, 4 Romans of military age lay dead on the battlefield of Cannae. Thankfully, for the sake of my speaking English, which has a lot of Latin in it, thankfully Scipio Africanus got away. Well, later to be called Africanus, because he was the one at that time he was a tribune in the army, and he got away on a horse. Had he not, well, Rome might have lost that war. But anyway, I can't remember what I was talking about now. So that was a double envelopment. That was the origin, maybe not the origin, but that's the most famous example of a Kesselschlacht, a cauldron or kettle battle, the idea of encircling your enemy and destroying them from all sides. And that's what Germany has always sought to do since the days of Frederick the Great, because usually, at the moment Germany has the largest economy in Europe. That's since it's united, in 1871, after the Franco-Prussian War under Bismarck, it united. But traditionally, the largest territory within the sort of German sphere was Prussia, but they still had a small economy. And so they sought, using superior military discipline and speed, rapidity, and tactics, to win a war very quickly. And of course, that's what they tried to do in 1914, when they tried to do their big sort of right hook around Paris, the so-called Schlieffen Plan. And again, in World War II, very effectively with their tanks and their airborne artillery in the shape of Stukas and Junkers and things like this, very effective. Is that happening at the moment in Ukraine? 100% not. It's bogged down, it's slowed. it's deteriorated into a bloody insurgency. All of the Ukrainian troops now, even women, and of course there's no reason why a woman can't be a better fighter than a man. We know the best kills in World War II, many of them were from women snipers. The Russians used them extensively, and in fact the Germans were so furious that the Russians were using female soldiers and snipers. Whenever they caught one, they would shoot them, which was completely illegal. But who gave a damn? Back then, the Germans didn't obey any rules of war, because in their mind it was Vernichtungskrieg. It was a war of extermination. It was a Kulturkampf, a war of cultures. Us against the Slavs and all that stuff. And that's what they're doing about anyway. They're strapping up the girls with AKs as well as the men. They're all heavily armed. They're getting a load of Milans from UK, a load of javelins from America, and they're taking out these Russian convoys. And at the moment, we've got to remember, it's the time of the Rasputitsa, the roadlessness. The Germans came across with this back in 1941. Obviously, they began their invasion June 22nd, 41. And then it froze up, it bogged down, and the Russians smashed them. We used to say in history, we were stopped, not we, the Germans were stopped at Moscow in 1941, and they were stopped by the winter. No, what? No. They were smashed at Moscow. They were first stopped, then they were absolutely obliterated. And if you actually listen to the memoirs of the generals or their recorded conversations after we captured them, they all said, we knew we'd lost after Moscow 41, after they were smashed. And this appears to be, there's not the smashing taking place at the moment in Ukraine, but there's certainly the stalling and the stopping. And going back to the Rasputitsa, the point of that is you can't go off-road when you have to stick to the roads, and tanks mess up roads. They churn them up and damage them. I believe one of the Ukrainian ministers said that in terms of the damage to the roads, as well as other infrastructure, the Russians have already cost 100 billion, and they're going to have to pay it back, kind of thing. Well, good luck with that. But they chew up the roads, and then if you want to go outside of the roads, fine if the ground's frozen, fine if the ground is heated up and dry like in summer. Not at the moment, not in the spring, not in the Rasputitsa, no chance. And that is why we're seeing these big convoys stored for days. So this is not a blitzkrieg, and it's completely ignorant for all these news channels to talk about a Russian blitzkrieg on Ukraine. If it is a blitzkrieg, it's the worst blitzkrieg in history. End of video.